Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this talk, an interview with Mikael Chaudary at 2 o'clock today. And welcome, of course, to the Festival of Nature. My name is James Hanson. I'm a wildlife filmmaker, and I'm going to be interviewing a very special guest in a bit. But first, a little bit about the Festival of Nature. This is the UK's largest celebration of nature, and it's for a whole week, from the 5th of June to the 12th of June. I can't wait to see what else is in store for us, and we've already had great events, such as a great trip to Folly Farm with Avon Wildlife Trust. So my special guest today is Mikael Chaudary, and he's from the Natural England. And we're going to talk a lot about inclusivity and accessibility into nature, because it should be accessible to everyone, but this isn't always the case. So without further ado, Mikael, welcome.
Hello, thanks very much for having me, James.
No, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm absolutely loving it. I've just passed my driving theory test at 8 o'clock this morning, so
congratulations.
Riding a little bit of a high. Yeah, thank you very much.
Nice. When do you hope to take the test, the practical?
Oh, I've been given a date, April 2022 at the earliest, apparently.
Oh,
hoping there's a few cancellations before then.
Yeah, good luck. That's a long time. So Mikael, obviously you work at Natural England, and I was having a think about this before starting the interview, and I thought, I asked my friend, what does Natural England mean to you? And he sort of turned around to me and said, is that the one with the surveys? I had to think, it's like, actually, not a lot of people know straight out what Natural England does. So it'd be great to hear, your role and as a whole, what Natural England aim to strive to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think fundamentally what Natural England is aiming to do is to encourage a deeper and more meaningful connection to nature across the country, but doing that in a very specific way, using an evidence-led approach. So what we do at Natural England, the bulk of what we do is we go out into the field. It is a lot of surveys, both qualitative and quantitative. We consult with external agencies, and we have our own social researchers and ecologists. And yeah, essentially we gather a lot of data, we gather a lot of facts, and we crunch the numbers, we look at trends, and then we try and make that into either accessible kind of tips and words of advice to the general public, or we can kind of distill that further into policy points, essentially.
Perfect. Have there any surveys that you've been working on that have gone into either of the two?
Yeah, so one of the really, really exciting ones is called the People and Nature Survey. So that's actually one of the biggest surveys, if not the biggest of its kind in the world. We've got around 200,000 respondents, and it's basically looking at how people's connection with nature, how to measure it basically. And we're looking at separating the data by socioeconomic level, age, geographical location. And we put out these monthly surveys, and we get these, thousands of respondents. And then we can look at these long-term trends. It's been really useful, of course. So we started this just before COVID. What's been really interesting is analysing it over COVID and seeing, and hopefully, as we continue to gather this data in the next few years, we can really see how was our kind of nature connectedness affected by COVID, what came before, and we also had the precursor to the People and Nature Survey, PANS, which is called the Monitoring and Engagement Nature something, and that's abbreviated to MENE. So we've got MENE, which is kind of the spiritual precursor to PANS. PANS, which is what we're doing now, and then we're going to be able to basically do a comparison, spreading back years and years and seeing exactly how our perception of nature, how we connect with nature has changed over time. Really, really exciting.
Perfect. That sounds amazing. I think it's always a difficult one to sort of, how do you measure how connected someone is with nature?
Yeah. Wow, that is a million-dollar question.
That's not my job.
A lot of different people, they have a lot of different answers for this. Well-being, there's a whole kind of discourse on how well-being is measured more generally. We get things like, okay, what's your proximity to green space or blue space? What's your proximity to kind of good quality green space? When was the last time you visited green space? And yeah, we kind of put these out as monthly indicators on things like Twitter. So I'm involved with some of the comm stuff as well. So the kind of social researchers might fill out basically a monthly report, which is a really detailed kind of facts and figures. Here's where we are. And then I'll kind of pick out the key bits of information month after month. and let's put that out as key monthly indicators. So yeah, we have things like when was the last time you visited a green space? What are the things that the barriers that prevent you from visiting green space? So as you can imagine, in winter we had things like cold weather. When the pandemic struck, a lot of it was about I don't want to spread the virus. I'm being more mindful. But now we've got lockdown restrictions ending. We've got a lot nicer weather as well. Seeing just people using all these amazing natural resources, which we're really, really happy about. But of course, part of our job is also kind of safeguarding these places. And the more people that you get at a place, obviously the more kind of mental and physical positive well-being outcomes you get. But also you get these kind of recreational hotspots, which can, there's a lot more litter, there's a lot more maintenance that needs to be done. So yeah, that's kind of what it's about, really.
And that's brilliant. I suppose, being connected to nature. Have you found, I mean, I don't think we can not talk about being connected to nature with the pandemic, of course, because the one thing people could do was get outside, particularly in the early era of the first lockdown. Wow, it's going to be weird talking about that in 5 years. But, I remember the first. No, but in the first lockdown, you could get outside for a bit and go for a long walk. And a lot of people did. And from the surveys, did you see this was the case? Did you see that people going out and enjoying it a lot more? And how has it changed over the three lockdowns? 3 lockdowns now.
Yeah. So we're actually producing our kind of first year 1 review. So we're crunching all the numbers. We hope to have that ready in the next couple of months. But it's really interesting, the data that we've seen, actually. So the biggest increase, I think, is when you look at urban green spaces. So obviously a lot of the population in this country is in kind of urban sprawls. And what we saw was a deeper appreciation and use of urban green spaces in the pandemics. And you saw, a lot of kind of community groups using green spaces. So I've just actually been down to a place in Luton called Barton Hills. And it's absolutely fantastic the way that the kind of local community groups were using it. So you had, mosque groups in Ramadan, which is the holy month for Muslims. They would go into Barton Hills, which is this amazing. It almost feels like you've been transported to a kind of ethereal world. It's kind of you're kind of surrounded by this ring of hills, and you go down into this gentle slope, and then you can't hear much. The temperature increases, so it just kind of feels like you're in this nature blanket almost.
In Luton,
fantastic. In Luton, yes.
Wow.
In Luton.
And I know Luton, but I didn't think it was the nature hotspot.
Well, yeah. And what you find is these are the places that people are flocking to when everything else is closed. And you had people giving sermons out there. You had community groups connecting, and you just have people like dog walkers and stuff just stretching their legs and really getting a deeper appreciation for nature. And I think the point of when I went down there to do a kind of bit of filming, a bit of kind of saying, look, these kinds of green spaces, this amazing resource is on your doorstep for most people. And I think what the pandemic has really kind of brought into sharp relief is that there is a huge public appetite for this. People really want to get out and enjoy these kinds of spaces. And I think a big barrier to that is just not knowing what's on your doorstep. And another kind of more personal example is, so I live in South Manchester, Withington, and I've been here for 3 years in kind of Fallowfield, Moss Side. I've been in South Manchester for a little while now, and I had no idea that just on my doorstep there was about 4 or 5 parks, really lovely spaces. They're very clean, they're well maintained. And just in Didsbury, which is a 30-minute walk away, we've got this fantastic nature reserve, which is just it feels absolutely incredible, and it leads onto the River Mersey, and it's almost like a secret, a community secret, so all the locals will know about it. But if you live just 15 minutes away, you've got no idea this place is there. So I think that's going to be a really, really key thing for Natural England, but also kind of other organisations in the sector to really make sure that people understand and know and signpost these green spaces. But of course, there is then the responsibility for people who use these green spaces to take care of them. And there's something that institutions can do, which is offering maybe litter bins, making sure the litter bins are collected, But it's kind of a kind of give and take almost. There has to be some
Yeah.
personal responsibility, but there's also the responsibility for the institutions to make it as easy as possible.
It's that stewardship, I remember learning about environmental stewardship schemes, and I think, we do need to have that duty to, help the environment. So, but why do you think if these urban green spaces were there, if these urban green spaces were there, why were they not signposted well enough? Why weren't people realizing that they're just on their doorstep?
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant question. I think perhaps there just wasn't as big of an appetite for it before COVID. When you can kind of go into town and have a few drinks, and that's your kind of normal Friday night. With everything closed down, it's just kind of we've got no choice, and what are we going to do now? How are we going to spend our time? And yeah, it's just a lot of it is okay. We're going for walks now. We're trying to keep active. The gyms are closed. How are we going to work off this lockdown weight? You're going for walks. You're following your feet, and then all of a sudden you just chance upon this amazing scene. So I think a lot of it is just kind of we're almost forced, into finding these new places. But yeah, it absolutely shouldn't be like that. I think there is also a little bit of kind of what's the word? I don't want to use the word gatekeeping. I can't think of another one, so I'm going to use it. So perhaps local groups they've got this amazing. Another example, just local down the road, Levenshulme. I suppose it's not really there's not much gatekeeping going on because it's got its own Google Maps entry, but it's called the Secret Lake. And I had no idea about this, but it turns out the locals over many years have had this industrial space, and it started off as a kind of just a pit of water, and over time they would fill it and purify the water. They didn't introduce, but over time the ecosystem organically flourished. And now what you have is just in the middle of this kind of industrial kind of waste ground in Levenshulme, just a beautiful, serene pond.
Wow.
And I was just there over the bank holiday and I had a little dip, and it was fantastic. And that's just, in South Manchester, in the urban sprawl, you've got this kind of little pocket of paradise. And it just makes you question, once you've seen that once, that's all it takes. You're like, okay, what else is on my doorstep? And I think if you can get people to do that just the once, they'll have that curiosity for themselves, hopefully.
Yeah, once people realize, actually, I don't need to drive 45 minutes away and go find the biggest natural nature park, which, they are great on nature reserves, but sometimes it can just be a small pocket, which is brilliant. But with people, I suppose, do you think there is an issue with how nature is portrayed? I think, there does tend to be a tendency of who has access to these environments, and that's just not the environment, that's a lot of things. I think there's an issue which needs to be addressed in terms of getting into both environmental jobs. You yourself is brilliant to get into natural England, but I think how is there a problems with inclusivity issues? Could that be a reason why? And if so, what can we do? What needs to be done?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a problem. I think there's a wrong perception that, first of all, green spaces and rural spaces and green infrastructure is for a specific kind of social strata, just one group of the community, which usually is kind of middle class and white and usually male, but not always. So those are the people who kind of go out into the countryside and on walks and stuff like that. And I think that so what we're doing at Natural England, for example, is we're doing a bit of soul searching ourselves. And what we're doing is a staff survey across the whole organisation, seeing how many people in the organisation are identifying as coming from minority ethnic backgrounds. So we did a first iteration of this, and the results were shocking. And it wasn't just Natural England, but across DEFRA as well, where you're getting results like 2% of 2% of the population of the people who are working in Natural England are identifying as ethnic minority background, compared with the last census in 2011, I think it was 14%. So there's a huge disparity there.
So it's dropped.
In the census, 14% of people in the country were from minority ethnic backgrounds.
Right, I see.
And then 2% in Natural England. So yeah, there's a big gap there essentially. But I've got to say, at least at Natural England, they've been incredibly proactive in trying to understand why, first of all, that's happened, and then taking steps to remedy that. So I'm part of the EDI network, Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion, and it's just incredible. So I've already given presentations to, some really senior stakeholders in the organization, and I was just blown away with how constructive and how almost welcoming of the conversation everyone is. Everyone recognizes, this is not the kind of organization we want to be. We want to reflect, the country that we, seek to serve ultimately. And how do we do that? So there's a few different things. Is it we're not recruiting enough people from minority ethnic backgrounds? Are there barriers to entry there? If we're only having jobs, for example, on civil service jobs, the official website, is that only attracting a certain kind of demographic? Do we need to start putting these job adverts in community centres or elsewhere? So we get a diversity of applicants. But then, so I actually I put together a presentation, which was, again, really well received by the senior stakeholders. I crunched some of the numbers across the civil service. And what you get with the bigger departments, for example, HMRC and DWP, is you get, on paper, they're very diverse. They've got a lot of BAME people working in the organization. But when you actually look at it a bit deeper, all of them are at a certain level. And then you've got to ask yourself if you're very diverse on paper, but the further up the kind of hierarchy you go, the less diverse it is.
Is that diverse?
Exactly. And so, so my personal experience has been really positive. I mean,
that's good.
I started off very much at the kind of the lower end of Natural England. So I was a graduate. I graduated a couple of years ago, and I always wanted to be a civil servant. I didn't know really where I wanted to be, but I knew I wanted to be a civil servant. So I was looking at these kind of lower kind of AO jobs. Managed to get one at Natural England, and I was doing actually wildlife licensing, which I don't know who's watching, but the majority of people probably know Natural England from its wildlife licensing. That's the majority of kind of general public interaction that they have with the organisation. When you want to knock down a building at the end of your garden, you need to get an ecologist round to do a survey, etc. And I knew that I wanted to do something, addressing inequality and addressing, how do we get more people connecting with nature? So I went on LinkedIn, believe it or not, and I saw someone who'd also gone to my university and who worked in Natural England for a few years. And I said, look, here's, my name is Mikael, I've just joined the organisation. I'm interested in tackling inequality, social research. I did anthropology at uni. Do you know anyone in the organisation who could help? And, this person is many grades my senior, and they emailed me within 30 minutes saying, look, here's my Natural England email. Let's have a chat on Monday morning. Let's have 30 minutes. I'll pencil you in. They put me in touch with somebody. They put me in touch with another person. And eventually I got in touch with one of my colleagues who I'm working with currently, and they said, look, there's an opening in our team. I know that this is a few grades above what you're currently working at, but I think you've got a chance here.
That's brilliant.
And then I told my line manager, who again was just extremely supportive, and they said, go for it, And I was worried. I've only been here for a few months. Is it going to be too much? Is there a minimum period that I've got to, work for example? And they were just literally like, look, there's an opportunity there. Go for it. We're going to help you, whatever it takes. And just having that backing, that unequivocal backing.
That's the issue, isn't it? I don't know if I can take the leap. And to hear that they're so obviously internally at different stages, at least it shows that they want to push people up regardless, and they go for it. So it's just about encouraging people to get out and apply.
Absolutely. And just, I think I was really, kind of right place, right time, just very fortunate that, that person who happened to message responded and was so good. But at the same time, now that I've worked here for a bit longer, I now know that 99, if not 100% of the people at Natural England, if you go with a message like that, they will do their damnedest to try and put you in touch with someone who knows, who has that kind of remit and who will then put you in touch with someone else. So I definitely think in terms of the culture, that's one of the best things about working in Natural England. And I've not worked in any other kind of organisations in the sector, but from what I've heard from other people, that's the kind of culture. It is very welcoming, and it's, everyone recognises that we need to be doing better in terms of the EDI front and the diversity front. And yeah, so I think I spoke a couple of months ago at an event which was looking at how do we do this then? What does it look like having a more diverse sector? And what we found was that there were a lot of grassroots movements and organizations who were doing incredible work and had done for decades. These were people who had gone into communities, were leaders, would, just from the money that they had in their own pocket, they would be renting out a minivan, taking out kids from inner cities and taking them out to the Yorkshire Dales, for example. And it's just like, what can we do to help these people? What we don't want to do is just call upon these organizations and individuals when we're trying to fulfill, an EDI quota or tick a box or whatever.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do at Natural England is involve these amazing, motivated stakeholders at every level of the process. And I think, it is a massive. I think the phrase is institutional anchoring or something like that, where if you're the Natural England or DEFRA or the NHS and you're working with smaller community groups, if you say, okay, we're in partnership with you now, you give them almost that authority and that legitimacy that alone they may not have had. And that's kind of, I think, the first step in just kind of recognizing this amazing work that people on the ground are doing. And then instead of trying to reinvent the wheel and just kind of doing what they've done so successfully over many years and claiming it as our own, just working in partnership with these people.
It's not about taking over. It's about helping. Which is really reassuring, and hopefully people listening can realize actually it's not so scary or difficult. Not even the fact that it's scary, but it is accessible for anyone to apply. Speaking of, is there any questions we have for Mikael while we're here? Because I can imagine a lot of people would love to get into the civil servants or at some point help. I mean, do you think you're doing a lot in terms of helping the environment in the UK? Because it's a lot to do. A lot of people are talking about rewilding. Of course, recently Natural England spoke a lot about reintroductions, which sounds great. The task force, I had a read on that. I think that's brilliant. But I think, do you feel that progress is being made?
Absolutely. I think I can only speak, into my specific work remit, unfortunately. But from what we do, a lot of it is not so much interacting with the general public. So we do a lot with peat bogs. We do a lot, rewilding, species reintroduction. But I think now there definitely has been a kind of steer into the direction of there's this moment in time now after COVID where there's this deeper appreciation for nature. How do we capitalize on this? How do we make sure that, because sometimes political stakeholders can be quite, they don't.
They have an agenda.
They have an agenda, exactly. That's the very way of putting it. And what's relevant to one kind of government may not be relevant to another. So it's about capitalizing when we can capitalize on it, which is now, I think. But yeah, I think the bulk of it, as I said earlier, I think is offering up really robust data and statistics that will inform, hopefully, policy proposals.
Statistics, but also easier for anyone to read. I think that will be the key, won't it? It's just just some forms I've read from the government are just pages long. It's like, nope, never mind. Thank you very much. Well done for doing 10 surveys, but I'm not going to read through 100-page survey sort of thing. So it's definitely about ensuring that everyone can read it nice, accessible. But I think from what it sounds like, that Natural England is going in the right direction. They acknowledge it's a problem, and trying to improve it is the first step.
Absolutely. I think just being a smaller department, or not department, but ALB, arm's length body, we don't have as much capacity and resource as our kind of bigger brother DEFRA or other government departments. But we try our best with comms. We do try our best with comms, but oftentimes we don't really have dedicated comms or press officers. So, for example, I'm not a comms officer or a press officer, but I do some of the comms for the People in Nature Service and the monthly indicators. So we've kind of tried different iterations of trying to get these simplified messages out. So it started off as a kind of, so if you go onto the Natural England Chief Scientist Twitter account, you'll see some monthly indicators which I helped put together. And we found that actually the engagement wasn't, stellar every month that we put them out. So we're thinking, okay, how are people consuming media? I've just downloaded TikTok and I've lost myself there. People are watching videos. They don't have time to be scrolling and reading threads and stuff. So what we're doing now, and shout out to Amy Greenwood. I don't know if she'll be watching this, but she's
she will now.
She's absolutely brilliant. And she had this, brainwave. Why don't we use videos? And she, suggested this software which just makes it so easy to just put these stats and texts, which it was a bit painstaking having to fit it all into the character limit for Twitter, while still trying to have some kind of narrative and not just bombarding people with stats. Now we can just put them on a kind of video, and we're gonna trial that and see what it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, good luck. I think that is the way forward with science communication, isn't it? Yes, it's great to have things in large paper surveys, but at the same time, apart from my grandma, not many people read the newspapers anymore, so we're not reading those surveys. So if it's short and snappy is the way to go on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the social medias. And I think that sounds a great way for people to feel more connected and not isolated, but also just to get people out there. So no, it's brilliant.
And just on that point, I think with social media now, I think what we're seeing is, especially in the younger generations, Gen Z, is this environmental mindedness. That's
absolutely.
ubiquitous. If you don't believe in climate change, or if you don't care about climate change, even you'll see, people question you, like, what's wrong with you? Like, you're not paying attention? Like, are you misinformed? And so, yes, it would be remiss of us at Natural England and the sector as a whole to not be on these platforms, not be on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, to put these messages out to an audience that are actually going to be receptive to it, that want to be informed and want to have some kind of action. And I think something like the popularity of Extinction Rebellion, for example, with younger people, really exemplifies that. People are really jumping at a bit to be active.
I think it's if anything, it showed that actually this affects everyone. It's not just some hippies in Bristol running around, trying to say we want change. It's like, actually, no. From my youngest brother as well, he was at school and they were going marching, and I think it's brilliant that actually everyone, and not just kids either, across ages. And I think if government organisations can get on board with it and pick the right market and pick where to show what they're doing is right, then I think we can go far and actually make differences as a society, not just governments making decisions or communities making decisions, but governments can help communities, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Mikael. It's been great talking to you, and I hope everyone's learned a lot, because I know I have. But do stay tuned, guys, because at 3:00 there'll be another interview at 3 here as well. So yeah, thanks very much, and see everyone later.
Thank you, James.
Thanks, Mikael.
Been a pleasure.